We got to hear a lot today from both Milwaukee Bucks players and coaching staff, just the whole personnel after a team practice, and we got a lot of great quotables that we're going to get into. So, all that and more coming up on the latest episode of Bucks Latest, presented by the good people over at FanArch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon, and before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are still on the road to 2,000 subs, so if that's a journey you feel compelled to join, please consider pressing that big red subscribe button below, and also turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. And the first that we'll get into today of the number of players that we actually got to hear from themselves through a bunch of different interviews that were conducted by a bunch of different media members. We're going to get to what Doc Rivers said about the defensive changes that could be coming, or at least the improvements that he sees the Bucks possibly being able to make. It's not really definitive whether this team can actually go through with these kinds of things, but Doc Rivers, he talked about the way that this team can improve on the defensive end. And at the time of this quote that was given to Eric Name at The Athletic, who's been doing a great job reporting all these different kinds of things, the Bucks were then the 24th ranked team in defensive rating. Now, as of the latest time that I've looked at it, it's to number 22 in the NBA with a 117.0 defensive rating. Absolutely stellar. But Doc basically talked about the differences both in man, zone defense, and basically just keeping the bigs away from the 3-point line. The actual quote from Doc was, "We can absolutely be better. Our shell defense can be better. Our man defense can be much better. And then simplifying the bigs' rotations to keep them closer to the rim can be better. So there's no doubt we can be better, but we just have to do it." I mean, I do have my reservations just based on the personnel of this team, especially on the perimeter. Aside from guys like Ryan Rollins and KPJ and even Cole Anthony, who has proven to be a pretty solid defender for his stature throughout his NBA career. That's something I've talked about here and there as the season has gone on. But basically, with the way that Doc Rivers said this, I feel like a very he made a very broad oversimplification of something. Like he gave us a very simple way of saying our both our man and zone defense is bad, and then also our big men can't guard out on the perimeter. So, these are all problems that we have to fix. It seemed like he was trying to just not necessarily like sugarcoat all these things, but just the way that he said it, it made it seem like it was less of a big deal as it is. The fact that they can't rotate properly and they also can't stick with their man one on one. Maybe that's a little bit more of a concerning point than we're even realizing. But the one thing that I will definitely agree on with Doc in this rate is that actually for two reasons. Number one, I've said it throughout this season a couple of times at least that I do not like Jericho Sims and Bobby Portis having responsibilities of guarding guys out on the perimeter. I've said at least this season Bobby Portis hasn't been able to stick with guys out there, and also Jericho Sims, it's just not his game, and he's just not that kind of size. Though he is very athletic, it's more of an up and down kind of athleticism, not a side to side, and that is sort of the same for Bobby Portis, but not really. Of course, he's not the pure athlete that Jericho is. But yeah, keeping the bigs closer to the rim, that should be something that helps this team. And for a team that ranks as low as they do in blocked shots, especially as I've said in the last episode, with a team with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Myles Turner on it. Of course, Giannis hasn't been in action the past couple of games, but for a team with both of them on it, you would expect even that as of right now, the number of blocks per game would be higher. The number of, shots just deterred at the basket or affected at the basket would be higher, but that just isn't the case so far. So yeah, the first reason for the bigs keeping them closer to the rim thing is just obviously you can't have Bobby and Jericho Sims out there, completely falling all over themselves trying to keep up with smaller guys on the perimeter. But also, it should hopefully help in the rebounding aspect. If you keep those guys closer to the basket, you can try and take this team that is the worst rebounding team in basketball to this juncture. And if you keep your bigs closer to the rim, hopefully you can bring down more boards. Simple as that. Moving forward, we're going to talk about Kevin Porter Jr. and his perspective on the whole Giannis trade saga that's been going around, all these different reports from the media. You don't really know what's real, what's fake. And he actually talked about some things that he went on to say were false information, which I think is pretty interesting. And it really was in reference to a Chris Haynes report that came out a little while ago, saying that there were a couple actually that Giannis had sat the team down to meet with them and hold kind of like a players meeting to talk about all the trade stuff, and that they just have to keep their eyes on the present, focus on now, and block out outside noise, all that kind of stuff. But KPJ, he told reporters This is the last I'm going to say on false information. At the end of the day, everyone needs to wait until Giannis says something because all this is just he say, she say. And I guarantee when we start winning and we go 8-0, 9-0, you won't see anything about the Bucks. You won't see, oh, the Bucks are 8-0, 9-0, they're flourishing and Giannis is gone. We're not going to see any of that positive news. So at least for me, this is the last time I'm going to answer anything false. Pretty massive statement there from KPJ, basically coming out and saying that all these other reports of Giannis talking, having deep conversations, it seems like, with his management, his representation, and the front office, and the players, and keeping an open conversation around with them about his goals and whether he's going to request a trade or not. It seems like it's all narrative driven and none of it is really concrete. And actually, something else I can mention at this juncture too is that Kyle Kuzma echoed a similar kind of sentiment when he was asked some questions in the interviews at practice. He basically said that a team meeting with Giannis, or at least one that Giannis organized to talk about all the trade stuff and blocking the outside noise. Allegedly, Kyle Kuzma stated that that never happened. So maybe that's an interesting little nugget to put in there as well, because according to Kyle Kuzma, Giannis never sat the guys down, never talked openly about what his, not necessarily what his future plans are, but just how he's navigating the situation, how the rest of the team should respond. Seems like all those reports, and especially the Chris Haynes one saying that Giannis had done such a thing, that he held a meeting, that it's all for naught. So some pretty interesting perspectives there, both from KPJ and from Kyle Kuzma, who are basically just shutting this thing down. But also, I do heavily agree with KPJ when he said that, when we go on a huge run, when we go 8-0 on a 9-0 stretch, the media won't be saying anything. And that is exactly right. I'm glad that KPJ has understood that as well from his short time in Milwaukee, is that um, any other team goes on a 9-game winning streak, it seems like it's plastered everywhere on the NBA social media pages and everything, and just all in the media. But when it comes to Milwaukee sports, it seems as though the Bucks kind of get the cold shoulder in the media pretty often. So it's he's exactly right by saying that, even, let's say, if Giannis is there, is not, is still contemplating his future, if the Bucks go on a crazy run without him, all that's really going to do for the media is to say, "Oh man, is this going to convince Giannis to stay?" Instead of being like, "Wow, the Milwaukee Bucks are doing really well without Giannis. Maybe this is a team that is just good enough for him to return to, and he can lead them to some form of a deep postseason run." And especially with guys like Bill Simmons and other guys like that, I feel like the main thing that they go to is, man, the Bucks have been on a hot stretch recently. Is this enough for Giannis? Instead of just looking at it purely from the lens of, wow, the Bucks are on a hot stretch. They've been playing really well. So KPJ, I feel like, hit the nail on the head with that point as well. Also, something else that we have to get to is that AJ Green, you could argue, the Bucks' biggest example, or product of consistency on the roster, at least in terms of his efficiency and what you expect from him on a night to night basis. He might miss some time, at least maybe miss a game, the one upcoming against the Boston Celtics, due to an AC joint injury, which I don't really know much about that kind of injury. It sounds bad, but hopefully that doesn't keep him out of action for too long. Hopefully he can return or stay in the lineup against the Boston Celtics, and take it to him and really and show them that they're not the only uh, team in the Eastern Conference that once or currently has gone or is getting by shooting a bunch of threes, regardless of where he is in the lineup or where he is on the floor. He's just gonna throw him up and knock him down. But yeah, if AJ Green were to miss a game and miss some time in general, that would really, I feel like people realize obviously how great AJ Green is and how great he's been so far this season, but just the fact that losing a guy potentially like that in the lineup, again, who has been arguably, and honestly, maybe even outside of Giannis Antetokounmpo, their most consistent player. And this is even considering the Ryan Rollins breakout, because you know just from a percentage standpoint, at least what you expect out of AJ Green going into every game, a solid 12 points. He's knocking down 4 of 8 from three. These are the kinds of things that you legitimately get from him every game, and you don't really question it. So losing a guy that is just the picture of consistency, the best 3-point shooter from a catch and shoot perspective, definitely in the NBA, possibly missing him from your lineup for any stretch of time, that won't really bode well for the Milwaukee Bucks. But hopefully he stays healthy, he's able to come back to the lineup, and no difference is made there. But also, one more thing, one more kind of quote that I wanted to get to from a player or, coaching staff member, personnel, whatever, from the Milwaukee Bucks is that Myles Turner was answering some questions, and in those responses to the questions, he basically took accountability for not being everything that he was cracked up to be on the defensive end. Of course, he's been shooting the ball pretty well so far to start his Bucks career, but in terms of his shot blocking prowess and overall ability to deter shots at the rim, it just hasn't been what Bucks fans and and the coaching staff, whatever, have been expecting. So he took it upon himself, and this was after even Doc Rivers came out and said, I actually have a Doc quote as well. Doc said about Myles Turner's time so far with the Bucks. It's gone okay, not great yet. I think Myles is going to be way better later than he is now. He's been in one place for 10 years. It's just going to take a minute. Yet he's still very positive in the locker room, been great around the guys. And that's certainly one thing you could say about Myles Turner. From the outside looking in, he looks like a fantastic guy, fantastic teammate, and a guy that really genuinely cares about his teammates and the success of his teammates more than his own. And just looks like a very personable guy. So, no mistake in that. He definitely still has a great attitude through all this and through this extremely turbulent stretch that he probably wasn't expecting when he signed on to join the Bucks. But Myles Turner himself said, "I'm not where I want to be. My impact is greater than what the numbers may show, but I know that I'm not a finished product here whatsoever. Still working to be a better version of myself. There's things I got to do better, rebound better, take accountability there." And again, I don't know what it is that they put in the water there, but these guys are absolutely hitting the nail on the head. It's just about doing, taking action, actions speak louder than words. And the Bucks talk of good game, and they have so far throughout this entire season. And they certainly know the exact points of their attack that they need to figure out. And it's a do or die moment right now. You need to figure out the rebounding. You need to figure out the defense and limiting turnovers and not fouling and and things like that. But obviously this is a good stretch, or I mean, good stretch. This is a good step in the right direction for a guy like Myles Turner, who we know what he can do defensively. Watching him on the Indiana Pacers for the past decade, we know that he is that guy when it comes to blocking shots and making life hard for would-be rim attackers. So, Myles Turner getting off to a hotter start on the defensive end, that's going to be something. And you have to expect an adjustment period. I'm definitely not saying that Myles had to have had things all figured out after, again, like Doc said, playing in the same place for a decade and then coming to a brand new team, especially with all the pressure on him, going to a bitter rival and, everything going on with Giannis and whatever. There's going to be an adjustment period. And even with all the stuff that's happening with Giannis, you could argue maybe even that adjustment period could be a little bit longer just because getting settled in with all of this different kind of fanfare around that can't be easy. So, Myles Turner, I feel like he's going to begin to settle in a little bit more. And at least the one thing for me that has been a great sign is that he's been knocking down the 3-point shot. I haven't really looked to see what the percentage is like in recent days or in recent games, but Miles has really been striping it from downtown to start the year. Yeah, he's still at 39.2%. This would be a career year in terms of shooting from 3-point range. Would it be? Oh no, just last year he shot 39.6. Um, but yeah, 1.6 blocks a game. That is, if I'm not mistaken, yes, it's the lowest since his rookie season. Um, he knows exactly where he needs to pick things up. And I'm just really happy to hear him say, or, read him saying the word rebound, because this has been the big caveat with him. If you have Myles Turner on your team, you're just not going to get the rebounding productivity out of your center, your star center that you would want. And so other guys kind of have to fill in behind him and like I've said before, gang rebound to kind of make up for that lack of rebounding presence that Myles Turner doesn't have. Um, and these are the main talking points that we're going to continue to go over throughout the entirety of the year, or at least until the Milwaukee Bucks are not dead last in rebounding anymore, or at least, if they're not bottom five in rebounding. These are things that have to be fixed. They have to be fixed now. And, honestly, I'm confident that the more Miles settles in and the more games he gets under his belt, hopefully he can kind of just like build up sort of that aggression needed to box out a little bit more and just stay more intent on grabbing boards and finishing the other team's possessions and beginning your own. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. You can't finish a possession on defense unless you grab that board and take it up the other end of the floor. So this is exactly where Myles needs to focus. And, I'm happy that he at least realizes what's gone wrong with this team so far to begin the year. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. Once again, I've been your host, Dean Simon. And before you go, please leave that like, leave that comment, and subscribe. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future episodes. All right, I will see you guys in the next one.